The following is a presentation of the Austin Reed Network, now streaming for free on Roku and Amazon Fire TV.
This is the Reed Report.
Today, we are joined via Zoom by a young woman named Chloe Cole, and she is actually from the Central Valley. First off, Chloe, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I want to start from the very beginning, and I want to hear from you your story, which started, 6, 7 years ago?
Roughly around that time frame, yeah.
You were 12 years old. Tell us where you were in your life.
Yeah, from a pretty young age, I was kind of on the shy side, a little bit of a tomboy, and a little bit precocious as well. According to my mom and dad, I taught myself how to read and write, and I had pretty advanced language skills. But I was also at the same time kind of an awkward kid. I found it kind of difficult to get along with my peers at school, and I didn't have a whole lot of friends growing up, and I also had difficulties in having to do with school itself. And I was diagnosed with ADHD at a pretty young age, but I believe that I was actually on the spectrum, but I haven't really gotten a proper formal diagnosis for that because I've had 2 screenings in my life. First at around the age of 4 to 5, and then again at 17 after I stopped transitioning. But both times I was just told that I was just too smart and too verbose to be on the spectrum. And I started puberty at a pretty young age. I was around the age of 8 or 9, and it was really tough. On top of my own body developing at a faster rate than my mind, and I was as a person, I became very, very conscious of my body, partly due to the comments that my peers mostly would make about my body, especially my chest. And I started also using a phone I got my first phone when I was 11, and I started using social media, and that did exacerbate the body image issues that I had. And I often felt like, it was really difficult to imagine myself even growing from a girl into a woman. I felt pretty disconnected from other women, and I didn't want to have to go through the adult life as a woman, having to deal with things like periods and the possibility of getting pregnant and going through childbirth, and then eventually menopause and all of the pain that came with that. It was really hard to imagine myself in any of those situations. And around this time was when I actually learned about transitioning. I'd heard the term transgender a few times during my childhood, mostly just like overhearing it from like the TV or from adults in my family having conversations about it, but I never really cared about it until it was presented to me on social media in the form of Instagram posts. And these posts were often of young biological women who were in their preteens to their early 20s, and a lot of them were quite like me. They were very artistic. Many of them struggled with socialization and with making friends, and they were often quite like me, very tomboyish from a young age, and often struggled with their self-esteem. But they really seemed to be quite happy as they went through the motions of their transition, first starting with getting their hair cut, and wearing more boys' clothing, and then eventually going through puberty blockers and hormones. And they also seem to have this really tightly knit community amongst themselves. And this was something that really touched me as somebody who didn't really have a whole lot of friends growing up and wasn't particularly close to her family either. And I started to wonder, well, maybe this has something to do with me. Maybe I am one of these people. And that's when I started to think, this whole time, I was never a girl. It just made sense to me that I was, in fact, a boy, and that I should transition.
And you transitioned, you were right at 12 years old. So what grade were you in?
I was in, that was towards the end of my 7th grade year.
Okay. And your parents along the way, it sounds like they were very supportive, no matter what.
Right. I mean, at first, I decided to come out to them through a letter because it was kind of intimidating to bring such a big thing up to them, and I knew, like, even at the time, even at the age I was, that it would. I mean, most parents, I don't think, would really expect to hear something of that sort from their own kid. And I was nervous as to how they would react, and I wanted to allow them some time to really think about how they would. But they were supportive. They were okay with me changing the way that I presented myself, and they started referring to me as their son and by my preferred name, but they wanted to leave the decision to medically transition to me when I was 18 at the very least, when I would be legally an adult and it wouldn't be on their hands to consent to that, and when I would be a little bit older and have a better understanding of how it may affect me and whether I really wanted to go through the course of treatment.
So you were able to connect with doctors, and we're talking about Kaiser Permanente, is that right?
Right. My parents, at the same time, they didn't really know what to do about this because they weren't really informed on the subject. And so they decided that the best course of action would be to take me to the therapist, because they thought of it as an issue having to do with my mental health.
And during the course of meeting with therapists, meeting with doctors, what was their advice?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much as soon as I stepped in, I was just asked, like, well, what is your preferred name? What do you want us to call you? What are your preferred pronouns? And what do you consider yourself? But I mean, they never really delved into the possibility that my dysphoria could have come from underlying factors, and it was just accepted as a fact that I was, in fact, a boy. And their advice was just to transition. And through the research that I had done online about transitioning, and from the information that I gathered from official medical resources, that seemed to be the case, that transitioning was the only means forward, and that I should pursue a medical transition. I mean, the way I thought of it is that this is the condition that I have, and this is the course of treatment that I need. And I started telling my parents that I wanted to do this. I wanted to start taking testosterone. And they actually pushed back on this a little bit because, as I stated, they wanted to leave it to me when I was at least legally an adult. And they didn't think that at the age I would really be able to understand what the full picture of things. And I think that they were right, but they brought up their concerns to the doctors, and they were very quickly dismissed. They weren't really given any other option, and my dad asked about the regret rates, and he was told that children already know what they are from a very young age, and that the rate of regret for these procedures was less than about 1 or 2%, and that if I wasn't allowed to transition, then it would be a very likely possibility that I would kill myself. They gave them the ultimatum of, would you rather have a dead daughter or a live son?
We are going to take a quick break, but part 2 of my exclusive interview with Chloe Cole is coming up next, right here on The Reed Report. Austin Reed Network family, if you are looking for guidance with anxiety, fears, relationship, strategies, or loss or grief of family, friends, even pets, it takes courage to ask for help. Admitting that you cannot do everything on your own is the first step toward achieving personal wellness in a fast-paced and demanding world. The good news is, asking for help gets easier with a little practice. Contact Isla Brock with Central Valley Hypnotherapy today. To schedule an appointment, call 559-749-4803. Today's episode of The Reed Report is brought to you by White Tiger Martial Arts in Fowler. Mention Austin Reed and get 50% off your first month. That's White Tiger Martial Arts in Fowler. Here's their number. Give them a call and save today.
I'm Rod Spaninger, President of CF Vest Worldwide.
And I'm Joshua Bowder, Vice President of CF Vest Worldwide.
The mission of CF Vest Worldwide is to provide therapy vests to those with cystic fibrosis who live outside the U.S. In the U.S., generally any CF patient can get this vest through insurance, public or private. But outside the U.S., in the developing countries where we normally serve, these vests are just out of reach.
Since the inception of CF Vest Worldwide, we've delivered over 160 vests to over 42 different countries. We have a list of over 100 people who are waiting to get a vest in their country. With your tax-deductible donation, you can help us be able to afford to be able to send these vests there. So please visit cfvww.org and make your tax-deductible donation there.
I did a mock interview with Jackie. She knew right away that I was shy and quiet. So instead of jumping into the interview right away, she spent time with me helping to develop my elevator pitch.
Do you need help landing your dream job? Get career training from a professional recruitment coach. Serving over 1,000 clients, JKH Career Coaching and Consulting brings over 15 years of experience in student career guidance and workforce development. Student memberships and group discounts are now available. Don't get left behind. Get the coaching you need to increase your professional skills to get hired. With spring coming and graduation right around the corner, visit jkhccc.com or call 559-307-7712. That's 307-7712.
Look at that. Shake hands.
Fowler's hottest new martial arts gym. You'll get a kick out of it.
Time for part 2 of my exclusive interview with Chloe Cole right now on the Austin Reed Network. Talking to your parents today in 2023, how does that make them feel now?
I mean, they feel, obviously now that I've gone through the whole course of treatment, after our whole family being invested in this and being supportive of me and it not working out, they feel a lot of guilt, and they feel like they were lied to by the doctors. I mean, not only were we not given a full picture of how each of the 3 main treatments I was given, the blockers, the testosterone, and the surgery, we weren't given a comprehensive list of all the side effects and how it could affect me. They also didn't follow the course of treatment. They failed to follow the standards of care at the time, and they failed to disclose to my parents that studies have shown that most children who present with gender dysphoria tend to desist by the time that they're adults. And I think naturally over time, I definitely would have.
So, how old were you when you realized, you know what? This is not what I want. How old were you?
I was 16. I was in my junior year of high school, and this was about 3 or so years into taking testosterone, and less than a year post-op after I had my mastectomy. And I mean, before that point, before the surgery, I never really had any concerns specifically about transitioning. I didn't really have any negative feelings having specifically to do with that, but the post-op period was really difficult for me. Just having to look down at this heavily wounded area of my body and going through that, just having every night having to, after every shower, every bath, having to look at that part of myself, to take off and redo the dressings and take care of the scars and the grafts was difficult enough. But this is around the time that I also started realizing that there were a lot of things that I did miss about being a woman. Socially, it was becoming a lot more difficult for me. I found that my relationships with my friends and family weren't really as fulfilling as they used to be emotionally, and I felt like a huge disconnect between me and my peers and pretty much everybody in my life. And I felt like there were a lot of things that I just didn't really have any room to talk about. I couldn't really express myself the way that I used to be, or talk about personal hardships. And on top of that, I also started to miss presenting myself femininely and having long hair and styling it and wearing women's clothing and makeup. And in secret, in private, I would sometimes wear my old clothes or put on makeup that I bought from the drugstore. But I found it really shameful because I hardly even looked like a girl by this point, and it looked strange on me, and I started to hate how these treatments were making me look. And it wasn't until I was taking a psychology class, though, that things really started to click for me, that this wasn't what should have happened. Towards the end of my psychology course, was when I was learning for the first time in depth about things like child psychology and parenting. Mm-hmm. And I was told by the endocrinologist and the surgeon in my appointments for these treatments that it very likely would affect my fertility down the line as an adult, and that I wouldn't be able to breastfeed my children after my breasts were gone. Mm-hmm. But I was only between the ages of 13 to 15 at the time, and really I don't think any kid that age is thinking about any of that. I mean, they're already preoccupied with school and homework and extracurriculars and trying to make friends and fit in socially. That is a lot to expect of a kid, to be able to understand what that might really mean for them. And this really put into perspective just how important raising kids of my own and building a family of my own one day really was to me. And I started to think like not only might having biological children not be a possibility for me, but I'll never have that experience of feeding my children through my body and connecting with them through that way. And that was really devastating for me. And ultimately that was the thing that made me decide I can't keep going through this anymore. I can't keep doing this.
So I have a question. I've been doing a lot of research into this topic, and as many of us know, the world, America especially, runs on money. Do you feel that some doctors are possibly taking advantage of situations like yours, because the operation obviously is very expensive. This isn't cheap.
Right.
The medications, they ain't cheap. And for a doctor, it kind of, for cases like yours, to some doctors, I'm not saying all doctors, but some doctors, they may look at you and think, well, this is a cancer patient that's not going to die.
Right. I mean, these treatments, the hormones, and especially the surgeries, they make a lot of money. And by undergoing them, it basically ensures a patient to a lifelong path of medicalization, especially because there are a lot of complications that result for them. And especially for the genital surgeries, there's a very high complication rate and almost a guarantee that you will have to get some sort of revision down the line.
Let's talk a little bit about the lawsuit right now. Your family, and a team of lawyers are going against one of at least the West Coast's largest medical providers. So talk a little bit about that.
So I've teamed up with Harmeet Dillon and Center for American Liberty to sue my healthcare provider that encompasses Kaiser Permanente as a whole, and the hospital where I underwent the surgery, as well as the surgeon, the endocrinologist who placed me on hormones, and the gender specialist who referred me to surgery. And we sent out the letter of intent to sue in November of last year, and we recently filed it.
So it obviously is, as any lawsuit, it takes a while. These things, they're going to develop as they develop.
Right.
I want to ask you, say we've got a 12-year-old watching right now, or parents of a 12-year-old that are experiencing something very similar. Chloe, what can you tell them right now?
So I want to make it clear that I do not support an outright ban of medical transition for all patients, but I think it should be. I do not think it should. These practices should ever be performed on children. But I think in kids, the best course of treatment is just to take the wait and see approach, to let them express themselves without any interventions, and to assess where these feelings are coming from, where this desire to be the opposite sex comes from, and where these kids are getting the idea that they can actually become the opposite sex, whether it may be from social media or websites that they're using or the people that they're interacting with online, or if it's from the classroom or from their peers at school. But I really think that it is something that should wait. There really isn't any rush to undergo transition. I mean, I know a lot of people who transitioned well into their adulthood, and they're satisfied with their transition. So I don't really see why we are rushing kids into this, especially at an age where I really don't think that anybody under 18, and even most people under 25, would really be able to undertake this, because it is something that will affect every single area of your life, from your socialization to how you're perceived to your relationships with your family and friends and in your romantic relationships. And this is something that affects your body, both the way that your reproductive system functions, your sexuality, and just the overall picture of your health, because sex hormones play a huge role in many different functions of the body outside of the sex organs. But considering that kids don't really have a whole lot of experience or worldly knowledge, and their brains, most people's brains aren't fully developed until they're at least in their mid-20s. It's really, I think it's ridiculous to expect a kid to be able to consent to something like this. A problem with a lot of these kids who have gender dysphoria is that many of them don't really have a whole lot of friends, and they're often not very active in sports or school clubs or in their community in general. And I think being involved in like a sport or a school club or an extracurricular is really important for a child's social and emotional development. And that's often what these kids are missing out on. They don't really have that sense of community around them, or of teamwork, of working towards a goal together with other people. And that's often what they really need. That's definitely what I really needed.
I've done a lot of research about you, and you're not trying to make this political. It's right. I mean, you are a complete proud supporter of the LGBTQ community.
Right.
So this is more, if you can just sum it up in a nutshell, what you hope will come out of this.
My hopes in working towards this are that childhood medical transition as a practice is banned and never performed again. But at the same time, I think that the affirmative care model for gender dysphoric patients in general needs to be challenged, and there needs to be a better standard of care for both the dysphoric adults and children.
How can people learn more? How can people continue to follow your story, or maybe if they have questions for you?
Yeah, so I have a Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube account, all under the same username. It's CHOOOCOLE, CHOOCOLE. It often trips people up, but you should be able to find me just by looking up Chloe Cole. But I'm mainly active on Twitter. That's the main platform that I use and I like the most. So,
well, Chloe, thank you so much for sharing your story. Really appreciate it. That's good.
Thank you so much.
All right. Now I'm Austin Reed. Thank you for joining us, everybody. This has been an exclusive Digging Deeper report.